LA Bruins in 2026 have quite the unorthodox rebuild on their hands after Chip Kelly, after Deshaun Foster. They've hired an incredible head coach in Bob Chesney. In fact, Zach, I don't know if you know this stat. UCLA, it's their first time hiring a sitting head coach in college football in 55 years. The first time in 55 years that they have hired a sitting head coach in college football. So yeah, Bob Chesney, a unique opportunity. 40 players out of the transfer portal this last time. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this UCLA team turns out this season.
Yeah, I think you could make an argument that UCLA is the most intriguing team in the Big Ten because of Bob Chesney, because of the intrigue following Kurt Signetti, the Kurt Signetti model. He's going to JMU, or he's coming from JMU to Indiana. Chesney coming from JMU to UCLA. You have a five-star quarterback that has not lived up to potential yet. You have a lot of transfers. Really, really intriguing. And I think the other thing that's intriguing about UCLA is if UCLA does well, this could be the first time in the new look Big Ten that all four teams on the West Coast actually seem formidable.
Yeah, no, for sure it could happen this season. Washington's getting ready for a good year. Oregon's going to have a good year, obviously. They have some of the best players. I just put out my top 100 players in the Big Ten list, and I think I had four in the top 10 from Oregon. Three of them were defensive linemen, and Dante Moore, I had number three or four, I can't remember. In there, it was either him or Cade Piper. I had at number three. Anyway, so very interesting to see how the season's going to turn out for UCLA this year. Zach, what's some narratives that you're looking at? Obviously, the Kirk Cinetti one is the big one. We've talked about that on here. Is that the main one you're looking at, or are there other narratives you're looking for here with UCLA?
I think that's the main one, but I think an underrated one, and it's one that I think USC fans would be interested in, is can UCLA stake a claim in LA as the premier program? Everybody's expecting USC to be a potential playoff contender this year. And in a lot of ways, they better be for Lincoln Riley's sake. But what if UCLA has the better season? That's, I think, a question. If they have anything similar, if Chesney has a similar type impact to Kurt Signetti at Indiana, you're not just talking about UCLA being the most improved team in the Big Ten. You're talking about a possible stake to the claim that UCLA and not USC might be the best team in the Los Angeles area.
It's a possibility. Now, when you look at the Kirk Signetti of it all, I think on the outside looking in, this looks very much so like the Kirk Cinetti rebuild at Indiana. I think he's bringing in 10 transfers in James Madison. Signetti brought in either 12 or 13, I think it was. And so maybe it was 11, one of the two. It was right around that 10 mark as well, just a little bit above that. The difference here is that Bob Chesney has brought in multiple offensive linemen from James Madison. That was not something we saw Kirk Signetti do. Kirk Signetti, he was confident in Bob Bostad there at Indiana and what Bob Bostad was building. Chesney's coming in and he's saying, all right, let's bring some of our James Madison offensive linemen here. And they also got Hal Schmidt, the Boise State offensive lineman, who blocked for Ashton Genty. 6'7", I forget how big he is, 6'7", 300 some pounds. I had it written down here. Where did I have it written down at? But yeah, he's a massive, massive man. He blocked for Ashton Genty, 6'7", 329 pounds there for the Boise State offensive lineman, over 300 pass blocking snaps. It's going to be very interesting to see Bob Chesney do a little bit of the Kirk Signetti, but this time with some guys on the offensive line and on the defensive line too, for what it's worth.
Just to continue the Signetti comparison, and again, we're not. I think by the end of this video, people will understand neither of us are picking UCLA to win. Well, maybe you are. I don't know, but I don't think either of us are picking UCLA to win 11 games and make the playoff in year one.
No, I think they're a
That's
dark horse, but I'm not picking it.
Yeah, but again, there's a lot of similarities here. So unlike Will Stein, who we kind of ripped for trying to sound like Kurt Signetti, Bob Chesney has been at a number of places as a head coach. And guess what? Google him. He wins. Holy Cross, 44-21, made it to the NCAA tournament 4 out of the 6 years he coached there. He was ranked in the top 25 4 out of the 6 years that he was there. Assumption College, he was in the NCAA tournament 3 out of 5 years, had a winning record every season. Salve Regina, which is, I believe, a D3 school. He was 6-4, 8-3, 9-2, 23-9 overall, and at JMU, 21-6, and he made the college football playoff in year 2. And just, to go further, he won the Boca Raton Bowl in 2024. But not only that, not only does he win, but he also is bringing his staff intact from JMU from a couple years ago. So his offensive coordinator, Dean Kennedy, was with him at JMU and at Holy Cross. And his defensive coordinator, Colin Hischler, was at JMU last year as a defensive coordinator. Now, not as, only 1 year with Bob Chesney, but there is coaching continuity. What have we talked about with Kurt Signetti? Shanahan's been there. Brian Haynes has been there for years. Coaching continuity. So it's, again, it's not to the same level, not to the same degree, but Bob Chesney has coaching continuity on his staff, and he wins. So Google him.
There you go. Google Bob Chesney. We'll see if he says anything about Google him at Big Ten Media Days. That'll be fun if that happens. It'll be better than Deshaun Foster. We're in L.A. Thank you. Thank you, Deshaun.
I'd still prefer Deshaun Foster to Lane Kiffin's 30-minute filibustering today.
Yeah. Talking about how he's off social media. Congrats, Lane. You're off social media. Yeah, great job. All right, back to football. Zach, if Bob Chesney is going to be successful this season, he's going to need an offense to be successful for him. He brings in a number of players from James Madison. Landon Ellis, the wide receiver, comes in. He also is bringing in Wayne Knight, the running back there from James Madison. As I mentioned, multiple offensive linemen coming in as well. But what he does get is he gets an experienced quarterback. And here is something that, Kirk Cinetti did not have. Yes, Curtis Rourke was experienced, but he wasn't experienced in the Power 2. Nico Iamaleava has started 2 seasons in the Power 2, had a record-setting game against Penn State last season, 5 total touchdowns, first quarterback since, when was it? I think it was like 1978 to have 3 rushing touchdowns in a game, the single game quarterback record there. So Nico Iamaleava, a record tying quarterback at UCLA after that Penn State game. What are you most confident in when it comes to this offense for UCLA, Zach?
So I actually will probably go running back because I think Wayne Knight is going to be a dynamo. And I think they've got other backs with him that are also going to be very good. Anthony Woods is a senior, Javion Thomas, another senior. They have a big stable of backs, and I think they're gonna try to run the rock, and I think they will be able to run the rock, which should help Nico to have a very good running game. And Wayne Knight is explosive. I really like his potential. He is short in stature, and they're gonna have to spell him quite a bit if he's gonna survive in the Big Ten. 5'7", 190 pounds. That's not Big Ten size, but I think he is going to be a matchup nightmare for teams, and I think that's gonna really bode well for them.
Over 1,300 rushing yards last year for Wayne Knight, nearly 400 receiving yards, as well as a dual threat running back coming out of the backfield. Not going to get as much pass protection, you wouldn't think, in the Big Ten with his size, but you do have some other experienced running backs there. Javion Thomas, Anthony Woods has played a little bit as well. Dylan Lee comes over from Iowa State, so we'll see if he can get any time there. He rushed for over 100 yards last season. So, some interesting stuff here for UCLA and their running back room. Zach, I'm just going to go ahead and go with quarterback as I'm most confident in. Nico Iamaleava, yes, he does need some help in the running game and stuff, but he's a third-year starting quarterback. He has all the traits to be an NFL quarterback someday. I mean, he's kind of your classic SEC quarterback that, has all the traits to make it happen, but hasn't really made it happen on the field yet. But in Nico's defense, he did have a good year at Tennessee when he had a very good running game with Dylan Sampson. Dylan Sampson gets hurt, and then, he's just basically lunch meat for Ohio State's defense in that playoff game. Last season, he took it upon himself multiple times to try and win games for the team, and, his heart and his work ethic and leadership really stood out to me. I really do think if Nico Iamaleava can get a good cast around him, we can, not see a Heisman season or anything like that. I'm not predicting that, but I think we can see a really good season from Nico this year when he's not harassed in the backfield the entire time and is able to be a little bit more pinpoint accurate with some of his passes to throw to his receivers. And when you have guys like Landon Ellis, Mikey Matthews, other guys like that who have good experience, you should have a good opportunity here to make that happen.
Yeah, I think that the big question, and maybe this is continuing on with narratives, is how does this, I think, incredibly improved staff develop Nico Iamaleava? And does Nico develop into the quarterback we think he can be? Or does he kind of continue the DJ Lagway type hype train where it's, oh, he could be great, and then it shows flashes of brilliance and then never actually hits? I think that's a big question for me with Nico is I do think he can be great, but how does this staff develop him? Are they gonna have the same caliber of development? Again, going back to that Curt Cignetti comparison, can they develop Nico like Cignetti has developed Curtis Rourke and Fernando Mendoza?
We will see. We will see. Zach, on the defensive side, we need to do least confident, and I apologize, least confident. And on the offense, I do need to go with the offensive line here. I was talking them up earlier, but there is a concern here for the offensive line with me. Just when there are so many new guys, right? You get a number of guys from James Madison over, but again, that's not what Kirk Cignetti did. He brought in players around his offensive line that Bob Bostad had established there. So I'm not doubting the offensive line. I'm not saying they can't be good, but I do look at this and say, okay, I have a few more question marks here about this unit than I do pretty much every other unit, actually really more than every other unit on offense. I think this offense has all the pieces around the offensive line to be good. If the offensive line can just be, decent and not be injury ridden, I think they can have a good season.
Yeah, I think the continuity of the offensive line is probably the biggest concern because you have experienced guys, and I think that really matters. Eugene Brooks played a lot of snaps at Oklahoma. That's a big time get to have a guy who played in the SEC who's played a lot of snaps. You have Carter Swayze coming over from JMU, Riley Robel from JMU. They played a lot of snaps. Sam Yoon is a homegrown guy who's played 743 snaps. So you have guys. Derek Osman comes over from Harvard. So there's a lot of guys that have experience. But how do these Group of Five or even Ivy League guys, how do they acclimate to the Big Ten? And also, how do they play together? I think that's the biggest key here. More even like I think you could say that. I have a little concern about who's wide receiver one for UCLA. I think they have a lot of good veteran players in that room. I don't know if right now I would say there's a definite dynamic player, but I'd still have them elevated over the offensive line questions that I have.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's look over at the defense for UCLA. Zach, I'm going to start with an area that I'm not super confident in. I'm going to say the interior of the defensive line. Now, the edges of the defensive line, I am confident in. Zahir West, Gobera, I think is how you pronounce his name. Aiden Gobera comes over from James Madison as well. You have guys coming over here. Dallin Javier, he played all last season as well. So, you have guys coming coming over here who have experience playing on the edge, so I feel pretty good about the edge. It's the interior where I'm just like, okay, how is this going to work and how is this going to get put together? Amir Washington played at Texas Tech last season. He played in all 12 games there, so he does have experience, but he left Texas Tech, I assume because he wasn't getting the big payday that he wanted. So was there something that Texas Tech saw there that they didn't love? Tyson Ford comes over from Cal, and Cal was a little bit of an underrated team last season. They kind of went through the struggles of the travel and different things like that, but they gave some teams some really good games, and their defensive line wasn't terrible. So maybe that works out. And then you have your other guys are like Maxwell Roy, who's a redshirt freshman coming in from Ohio State. Good, but do I really want to lean that much on a redshirt freshman? And then the Rutgers interior defensive lineman, Daryl Degoe. I apologize, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but he comes in from Rutgers. And Zach, if there's anything we knew about Rutgers last season, it's that you don't want any of the defensive linemen from that scene. I'm sorry, or from that team. I'm sorry, I'm probably being disrespectful here, but the way that defensive line worked, I just want to stay as far away from that as possible.
I think one other concern with the interior is that you don't necessarily have a lot of space heaters here.
Yeah.
Fumiano is 6'4", 311 pounds. He's homegrown and he had 209 snaps. But you look at the rest of their players. Tyson Ford's 300 pounds. Like, he's a big guy from Cal.
Four-star recruit. He should be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Denagohi from Rutgers, like, is 295. But again, I think that entire defensive line struggled a year ago, so who knows? Maybe the development helps Denagohi. But aside from that, Maxwell Roy's 301, but you have a lot of defensive tackles who are, I think, underweight, and you're facing a lot of beef in the Big Ten. A lot of big offensive lines, a lot of big, powerful running backs. You've got to be able to hold up against the run, against the power run, and that is cause for concern for me.
Yeah, fortunately for them, when you look at the schedule, and we'll look at the schedule more in depth here a little bit later on, you don't have like the premier of the premier second tier rushing attacks in the Big Ten. I know you have the premier of the premier. Sorry, you have the premier of the premier. You have Oregon, you have Michigan, you have those rushing attacks you're going to be facing, but you don't have kind of the second tier rushing attacks of like Iowa and some other teams like that just pride themselves on the huge offensive line. You do have Michigan State, you do have Minnesota, you have Illinois, but those are not teams that necessarily come in with like the offensive lines that scare me. They can have good offensive lines. I think Minnesota will be improved this year, but it's not necessarily the most terrifying thing. All right, Zach, what's your most favored or most confident position group on defense?
Yeah, I think there's a number of areas to be encouraged by. I think I'll be cheap. We're maybe low on the defensive tackles, but I think I'm pretty high on the defensive ends. I think Zahir West and Gobera, they combined for 12 sacks at JMU. I think they're going to be able to rush the passer some. I'll say the other thing, I do think the back seven, I don't know if I'm confident that they will be excellent, but I do think I feel confident that they will be solid. I think they have guys that can cover. DJ Barksdale comes over from JMU as a corner. Roderick Pleasant, Scooter Jackson, I think are corners that I'm excited about. Scooter Jackson, one of my guys that we drafted during our team draft. So I don't know how good Scooter is going to be, but I am high on him. So we'll see how that works. And then I think the linebackers, I think there's things to like about the linebackers. Spinagati, Sammy Omasago, I think have skills and tools that could make them formidable. It doesn't mean that I think that they are a polished unit, but I think there are things to like about the back seven.
I would agree. My confidence is in the edges of the defensive line more than anything else. But you got Teo Johnson, DJ Barksdale, as you pointed out, Cole Martin. He should be a good safety for you as well. He had an interception and 3 pass breakups last season. Did a pretty good job in the run game as well. Played 12 games last year, so I feel pretty good about the secondary here. Teo Johnson's probably the one I'm most confident in, and I do think they have a little bit more depth here. Malik Hartford coming over from Ohio State. He played some last year, so you get a 4-star recruit, a guy that Ohio State was really high on. It just didn't work out for him there because they had another guy in McLean really take off and do really well there. He's an All-American type of player this season. So we'll see what happens, but this is going to be a really interesting year for the UCLA defense to see how they kind of bounce back. All right, Zach, let's end it here with our schedule, ceiling and floor record-wise. I'm just going to be honest, Zach. I think this is going to be the highest, like the most difference between the ceiling and the floor for me with UCLA because of the offensive line, defensive line, because of the JMU players coming over. I think it could go really well. I think it could also hurt, and one of the reasons why is because you do start with Cal, you do start with San Diego State, you get Purdue after that, and then Maryland, so a little bit easier. It's not like you're playing Oregon week 3 or anything like that, but still, a little bit of a tougher beginning of the schedule than most Big Ten teams get. Zach, if you had to say floor for the Bruins, what would you say floor-wise?
Yeah, I think the floor, man, that Cal game really looms large because I think if they lose that game, I think you're probably looking at a losing season potentially. Like I think 4-8 or 5-7 would be the floor for me, and a big part of it is there's a lot of question. The questions. I don't think there's as many questions as there was a year ago, 2 years ago. But those questions still loom large, and it's really the offensive line and quarterback development. And if you combine that with the questions we have about the interior defensive line, like that could just make things really difficult. So, like, I think they can beat San Diego State, Purdue, and I think Wisconsin, Michigan State, Nevada. Those trio of games, they should be favored in all those. I think at Maryland is a toss-up. And it's at Maryland, so you got to travel to that. And then at Minnesota, that's not easy. Illinois, I know that you're a bit lower on Illinois than maybe I am, but Illinois is not a pushover either. So I think you could. I'll say 4-8 if things really fall apart.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you on the 4-8. I mean, I think you're going to get Purdue. You should get San Diego State unless something just completely goes haywire there. Obviously Nevada, and then you're just asking for one of Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan State, or at Maryland. So I think 4-8. Like we're being very cautious there. You could probably say 5-7, but with a 6.5 win total, I also don't want to be that guy that's just like, yep, 1 win less than the win total is, and then go 5 wins more than the win total is on the other side, because I do think there is kind of equal opportunity here for where it could go both ways. If I was going to go with the ceiling, like I said on FanDuel, it's a 6.5 win total right now. I'm much higher on that. Zach, I do think this is a UCLA team that if everything goes right for them this season, everything happens the way it should, and you just get some really good coaching from Bob Chesney in critical game scenarios and situations, I think we could be looking at a 10-2 UCLA team at the end of the season. Do I think it's likely? No, not necessarily. I'm not picking UCLA to go to the playoffs, but you get some really good coaching from Bob Chesney. Maybe a ball bounces your way the right way at Michigan or against USC, and you're able to take them down. For all we know, USC could be, 7-8 wins going into that season. And if they're not having the season they think they should be having, what happens at the end of the year against UCLA? And UCLA, they're going to continue to play for it. So I'm at 10-2 as my ceiling for this team, which is, like I said, probably the largest difference that we're going to have. 4-8 floor and a 10-2 ceiling. Do you agree with me, or are you a little bit lower?
I would agree at 10-2. I don't think I think you could maybe make an argument even for 11-1. I'm not going to argue that. But I think if you look at the schedule, and I know SEC trolls will be like, "See, Big Ten schedules aren't that hard." SEC schedules aren't as hard as you think either, pal. But here's what I would say is that there is a reality that the only team on this schedule where I'm like, I don't think they have a shot is at Oregon.
Especially with it being that early in the year too.
Yeah, early in the year, uh, I think the talent level is just is a lot is more insurmountable than any other team. I think you could make a case that Michigan and USC are also close to that, but we still have major questions about Bryce Underwood, and I think that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And USC is a rivalry game.
Mm-hmm.
And while USC fans will come in here and say there's no way USC is going to lose to UCLA, which is how you should be, by the way. You should be talking your talk. I'm not taking that away from USC, but anything can happen, and it's not like USC has won more than they've lost, but they have not dominated like a team like USC should have been over the past several years.
Mm-hmm.
And USC also has a gauntlet. And so is USC a little dinged up by the end of the season? I think if you look at UCLA, they might be underdogs in more games than not, but I don't think they are that much lower than Minnesota and Illinois and Michigan State, Wisconsin, Maryland, Cal. Like, there's a lot of toss-up games there. And I think UCLA, if coached well, which I think we're both projecting that they will be, they can win those games.
There's a very real chance entering November, Zach, that this team is 7-2 or 7-1 or 6-2.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine what the college football world will be saying if UCLA enters November and they are 7-1? Like,
Google Bob Chesney.
I mean, we're going to be coming on the Big Ten Huddle saying, "Told you so." Don't worry, we'll be here. But I mean, it's possible that you could see that happen. Do I think it's super likely? No, not necessarily. The Cal game at the beginning of the year does give me some caution, but it is against a team with Taj Lupoi, where he's his head coaching for his first time in his career. So you never know. And I do think that UCLA is going to have a more talented team than Cal this season. We'll see how it goes. Zach, anything else on UCLA before we finish it up here?
So I'll give this could change. I think where I would land on my prediction is 7-5.
Mm-hmm. So over the win total, yeah.
Yeah, which splits the difference. It's over. It's an over. This is an interesting that at Maryland game is interesting for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's September. What do we say about Mike Locksley in September? He's dangerous.
He is in September.
And Maryland, I think I saw your graphic. Maryland is 8th overall in blue chip talent or
team talent overall.
Team talent overall. And it's on the road. And it's in September. So I think people who are chalking the Maryland game up to being a win for UCLA need to pump the brakes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think they have enough talent, and I think they will hold a coaching edge over several other teams where they're able to win. I have them beating Cal. I think they win their first 3 games. I think Wisconsin, Michigan State, Nevada, Minnesota, Illinois. I think out of those games, I think they can win 4 out of 5, and that's how I get to 7-5.
I think this is an 8-4 UCLA team. I'll just call my shot right now. I think they're 8-4. I think they beat Cal. I think that you split at Maryland and at Minnesota. That's not necessarily saying that I think Minnesota's on the same level as Maryland, but I do think early on in the season that could present a little bit more issues. And then you can't sleep on at Minnesota. They're a good team at home, and PJ Fleck is going to be ready to, especially late in the season in November against the UCLA team with Bob Chesney. So I'm gonna go out on the limb here a little bit and say 8-4. We'll see how the prediction holds up for me, but that's where I'll go for now, sitting here at the end of July.
I think what you're saying is that Bob Chesney is going to steal PJ Fleck's antidote of confidence and drink it for himself.
There we go. We would love that if that happens. Not necessarily for Minnesota to lose, but just so that somebody could get some antidote of confidence. That's what we need. All right, everybody. Hey, continue to check out the season previews. We've done Minnesota, USC, Indiana, Ohio State. We're going to be, or Iowa, Illinois. We're going to be doing Penn State as well, and then we'll continue to make our way through the rest of the Big Ten. So thanks for joining us. We'll have more season previews for you. Go ahead and check out the playlist and watch more of them. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.